There are some big updates with regards to Scientology. It's why I've got ex-Scientologist Asmithlevin back on the channel, or I'm on his channel as well. We're on each other's channel, simulcasting. There's a word for you. Aaron, what is the latest? There's been an appeal of sorts, or there's going to be an appeal with Danny Masterson. So just give us a very brief rundown of the Masterson without using that R word for those who are new to it, and what's going on now.
Most people who've been watching either of our channels will know by now that Danny Masterson was convicted of, we don't want to say the word. So convicted of violently abusing a number of women.
Yeah.
And he's going to prison for 30 years to life. Now, by the way, you've probably experienced this on your channel. All experts on various subjects will contradict each other. Okay, so I've had experts contact me and say, Danny Masterson in the state of California will, without question, be eligible for parole after 20 years because of his advanced age that he'll be at that time. And the people that give me that feedback are like experts on the subject. And then I have other experts who contact me and say, in no way, shape, or form does that apply to violent offenders. So anyway, Danny's either going 20 to life, 30 to life, one or the other, doesn't matter. It was generally understood he was going to appeal. So on September 18th, he filed his notice with Judge Almeida, the judge that presided over his second criminal trial, that he would be appealing. Now, he only had 60 days from September 7th to actually file the appeal with the appellate court. So with only a couple days left before the deadline, he did file the paperwork to formally appeal, and yet did not file his official, I'm going to call it complaint. I don't know if that's the right word when you're appealing, but his appeal complaint. Yeah. And he basically said, can we please have 45 extra days? And the judge was like, sure, you can have 45 extra days. So on December 22nd, that's the new deadline for him and his team to file the actual meat and potatoes of whatever their appeal is going to be. Now, one of the interesting things is that when you're appealing, the best legal minds have informed me, you never, ever, ever want to use the same legal team for your appeal as you did for your original trial.
Right.
And as of right now, Philip Cohen is still the attorney of record for his appeal, which, and one of the reasons that's weird is because at the sentencing, he did have two high profile appellate specialist attorneys at the table with him. And Sean Hawley, in the press that she did after the sentencing, mentioned this high caliber, appeals team. And yet none of those lawyers are attorney of record for Danny yet. I don't want to read too much into it, but a lot of what we do is speculation.
Sure.
And maybe Danny Masterson can't afford his appeals attorneys because Jeffrey Augustine reported on the Scientology Money Project blog that Masterson was just hit earlier this year with like $128,000 tax bill from the IRS for past due taxes. So anyway, a whole lot of stuff going on there. We won't know exactly what happens until December 22nd, when we will see, is he really using the same defense attorneys? And if so, because, an appeal is different than a defense. It's not, a defense attorney specializes in defense, appellate attorney specializes in appeals. It would be weird. Now, if he's using the same team, then he can't really complain that the reason he's appealing is because his team gave him improper representation. But there is one possibility. In the first trial and the second trial, during those trials, Danny's defense teams constantly complained about mistakes that were made by a previous attorney who represented Danny Masterson in the pre-trial hearing. And that attorney, I'm going to go totally blank on his name, but he's a super famous defense attorney. Is it Marty Singer? Let me Google Marty Singer and see what that dude looks like.
Sure. While you're Googling, I'll just say it's an interesting thought, isn't it? Because we always assume that people we see in the news and in the media must be just super crazy rich. Like, we always just have this idea they must just have endless buckets of money. This guy was in a very, very popular show. He wasn't the main character, I don't think, but I don't know how the money was split between them all. But he was in this hugely popular show. But Hollywood stars go through money crazy fast. And yeah, he was in one or two minor things after that. But really, yeah, I would be surprised if he, after all these months and months of some of the top lawyers in the world, I'd be surprised if he had that much left.
Yeah. Okay, I looked at Marty Singer. It's not the lawyer I was thinking of. But Danny Masterson, in his pre-trial hearing, had a very high-profile lawyer make some very serious mistakes by introducing a Scientology book, the Scientology ethics book, by introducing that book as evidence in the case, he opened up an incredibly difficult can of worms that I think one could make a pretty good argument that mistake, introducing the Scientology ethics book as evidence, that mistake opened the door to the prosecutors being able to introduce a lot more Scientology evidence into the case than they would have otherwise been able to introduce. So I'm thinking there's a chance that they are going to argue that their appeal is going to be based on the original defense team's mistakes in the pretrial hearing and not mistakes in the defense team for the second trial. So we'll see. We'll know by December 22nd, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what gets filed.
Wow. This is really interesting because obviously neither of us are lawyers. I learn a lot of my law from you, and you presumably learn it from some other people. But this is an interesting thing that, so if a lawyer seems to make a mistake, they make a bad call. I'm thinking of sports. They make a bad play. They do the wrong thing. But inadvertently make things more difficult for the suspect, the defendant, then you get to have a rego, like even though, so the lawyer's messed up and accidentally given away evidence by talking about Scientology that has helped to convict Danny Masterson. And so now they go in and go, oh, okay, you don't have to go to prison for what we know you did because your lawyer wasn't good. The lawyer you spent loads of money on and you chose made a bit of a mistake.
That's right. By the way, the live chat is telling me it's Thomas Mesereau who is the lawyer that made that mistake. Now, and Google Thomas Mesereau because he's an interesting looking character. What's amazing is that Thomas Mesereau, the mistake that he made, it honestly wasn't even his mistake. One of Scientology's own attorneys, Vicky Podboreski, was sitting in the first row, not at the attorney's tables, but in the first row where the audience sits, right? Vicky Podboreski works directly for David Miscavige. Okay. Vicky Podboreski called Thomas Mesereau. This was in the pre-trial hearing. That's important that it was in the pre-trial hearing and not in the first trial. If it was in the first trial, it wouldn't have mattered because the second trial is a redo. But because it was in the pre-trial hearing, those mistakes were able to carry over into the second trial. So Vicky Podboreski calls over Thomas Mesereau, basically gives him some advice, hands him the ethics book. Vicky Podboreski was almost without question in live communication against the court's rules with David Miscavige. Okay. Okay. She hands Thomas Mesereau the ethics book, and you can see him hesitate. And he goes, "Are you sure?" And she goes, "Yes." And then then he hands the ethics book to the witness who was on the stand at that point and asks her, "Look through this book and see if you can find X, Y, and Z." Okay. Well, when it was the prosecutor's turn to redirect examine the next day, the prosecutor went over to the Danny's defense team and said, do you still have that ethics book on you? Could I borrow that from you? And then proceeded to have the witness find the thing in the ethics book that she had not been able to find the previous day. Anyway, it was absolutely amazing. Now, someone could go, oh, so it wasn't even Mesereau's mistake. It was Vicky Podboreski's mistake. It was David Miscavige's mistake. And you go, well, no, Thomas Mesereau was the attorney who should not have asked a question he didn't know the answer to, who should not have introduced this thing into the body of evidence without knowing what the heck was in there and what can of worms that was going to open. So, I mean, in some respects, I'm saying it wasn't Thomas Mesereau's mistake, but in legal respects, it very much was his mistake.
Is Vicky Podboreski, just a side note here, is that who came into David Miscavige's life just before Shelly went missing?
Oh, no. Are you thinking of Larice, his communicator? Maybe. No, Vicky Podboreski is not a Scientologist. She's just an attorney who represents RTC and David Miscavige and the Church of Scientology.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I was having flashbacks. I think it was Claire Headley who was telling me that, all of the where's Shelly Miscavige, all this kind of stuff, the wife of David Miscavige, the leader of Scientology, that there was allegations or belief that there might have been an affair going on with this receptionist or something just before Shelly went missing.
With Lou. Now, they call her Lou, but her name is Larice.
That's right. Yes.
That's right. And Lou, so in Scientology, there's different titles. Like her position is she's David Miscavige's communicator. A communicator is like an assistant, a deputy, a secretary. Miscavige has a whole bunch of people in his entourage, and one of those people is called a communicator. So Lou is his communicator. Shelly was his assistant. And even today, Lou still holds the position of David Miscavige's communicator. And Shelly's off, digging ditches at another secretive base or something.
I mean, that's just completely crazy. I mean, I'll get back onto Masterson in a second, but I know you've told me before, but she is somewhere. Where is it? Somewhere Western America, isn't she? We think.
I think if you look up Twin Peaks, California, I think that's the actual name of the city. The base is referred to as a couple different things, whether it's Rim Forest or Rim of the World or Crest Line or whatever. I forget. But it's a very secretive Scientology base. Most of Scientology's senior-most managers don't even know about the existence or the location of that base. People who work at other CST bases don't even know the locations of the CST base is different than the one that they're personally working at. So it's a very senior level organization. And for most people in most circumstances, it would be considered an honor and a privilege to be assigned to work at one of those bases. In Shelly's case, it's more of a way to keep her away from other people. It's weird, right? Like the base itself isn't intended to be some sort of a punishment camp. Shelly being assigned there is kind of a punishment, a way for her to be banished, a way for Miscavige not to have to see her or run into her, and a way for her to keep her away from other Sea Org members so that she can't, run her mouth and say anything critical about David Miscavige. So it kind of serves a couple purposes.
I've got maybe what might be in Scientology circles or ex-Scientology circles a controversial opinion here, but I know that humans in general, the way we are with our pattern-seeking brains and binary ways of thinking, we like to assign like good guy and bad guy kind of thing, and we do it with the news and every different kind of news, oppressor, oppressed, good, bad, and it's just very simple. Things are often more complex. And the Where is Shelly thing, obviously that was started by Leah Remini, who was worried about where her friend is and all of these things. And then she's, in my opinion, from what I've heard, she's sort of become this beacon of like, we need to save this person. But firstly, is it possible like she just wants to be there anyway? And also, from your memory, I mean, maybe she wasn't as bad as David Miscavige, but she was still like a high up Scientologist. I guess it's that line of victim and perpetrator. Do you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. It's very difficult to draw that line. It's very easy to just casually put people who are still there in the bucket of bad guys and people who've left in the bucket of good guys and things like that. And even Leah Remini, in the Scientology in the Aftermath show, in the episode where they talk about Shelly, like the whole episode's dedicated to Shelly. At the end of the episode, Leah's talking to Tom DeVocht, another person who used to work with Shelly. And Tom says, I think Shelly got herself removed from her post because I think she would rather be on a post where she didn't want to have to work with David Miscavige every day. And Tom says, and remember, Shelly's very loyal to L. Ron Hubbard and believes L. Ron Hubbard is coming back. She would never want to leave. She would want to still be there when L. Ron Hubbard returned. And then in the show, they cut to Leah and Leah goes, of course. Of course, Shelly would want to still be there. Now, there's still an argument to be made that that as a Sea Org member, Shelly as a Sea Org member, as someone who was raised by L. Ron Hubbard, yes, she would want to be there. But there's still a sort of an inhumanity to the situation that she's been put in. And whereas it's true, and I believe, and I think it's worth saying that it's not like she's locked up in a dungeon and every day is being prevented from leaving. I think it's worth saying that on a day-to-day basis, Shelly Miscavige doesn't want to leave. I think that's worth saying. At the same time, there's still an inhumanity to the situation that she's been put in. And I think one of the reasons that's worth talking about is because it does sort of act as shines a spotlight on the contradiction of David Miscavige himself, who's the head of this cult that claims to have the solution to all of life's problems. And yet he couldn't even handle his own problem with his wife. He couldn't even resolve his marriage. I mean, one of the basic introductory Scientology courses is how to create a successful marriage, how to maintain a successful marriage. It's like, well, David Miscavige couldn't do it. If David Miscavige couldn't do it, why would we expect anyone else to be able to do it? If we're approaching this from the perspective of Scientology works 100% of the time when it's applied 100% correctly. So I think Shelly Miscavige is very much worth continuing to talk about. But you talk about the good guys and the bad guys and everything. There's plenty of former Scientologists who have had horrible experiences with Shelly Miscavige and see her as much as an abuser as David Miscavige. There's other people who see Shelly. I never worked with her personally. I never worked with David Miscavige personally. So I can't personally opine on that. But there's a lot of people who see Shelly as just sort of a slightly kinder, gentler, softer version of Miscavige, and an influence that kept him from being worse than he otherwise would have been. And that in Shelly's absence, Miscavige just has no checks on him whatsoever. So there's different thoughts on that. Look, there's a lot of high-powered Scientology executives who, when they were in, were viewed as bad guys, and now that they're out, are viewed as good guys. And we realize they were never bad people. Like Mike Rinder, Amy Scobie, Claire Headley. None of these people were bad people when they were in Scientology. They're the same person today, good, kind people, as they were then. They were basically following a con man, whether that con man is L. Ron Hubbard or David Miscavige. They were doing what was expected of them at the time. They were not bad people then, and they're not bad people now. I think the same is true for Shelly. I mean, any bad that she did in her role as David Miscavige's assistant, she did because she's following a con that she very thoroughly believes in. And I think when you get someone to believe something different, then they start to behave differently. So I don't necessarily see Shelly as an abuser or a victim. I mean, to me, she's sort of this symbolism of the fraud that is Scientology.
Absolutely right. I think if there's one thing that both of our channels actually really, if there's one thing that people can take away from it, I think it is that idea of good and evil being, that's just such a simplistic idea. And you see time and time again that is just not human nature at all. We like to think it is because of the movies, all the Tom Cruise movies with the good guys and the bad guys and all of these things. And that's it's not real life. And this idea that people do bad things because they're bad people, psychopaths do. It's 1% of the population, but a lot of people who are not psychopaths do bad things because they think they're good things. And it's no matter how much we sort of theorize about that, it's still very difficult to step back from certain scenarios and go, and not label someone a terrible person because they fell for some sort of cultish ideology. And that can be politically, that can be religious, it can be Scientology, of course. Masterson, back to Danny Masterson. Scientology, am I right in saying that they sort of kicked him out since he got convicted?
There's been some verbal reports about that, but nothing confirmed. And it gets a little interesting because, I mean, in this most recent era of Miscavige, it's become quite acceptable for things like this to only occur verbally. And yet even in the master, usually when Scientology is expelling someone, the news might travel verbally, but usually, and I'll say in all cases I'm aware of, eventually the ethics officer, will bring someone in and they will physically show them the actual issue, the piece of paper, the official expulsion order, the official declaration that someone is a suppressive person. They will show it to them because one of the basic tenets in Scientology is if it's not written, it's not true. So in the case of Danny Masterson being expelled, we have not yet heard from anyone who has actually seen it in writing. We've only heard from people who have been told by Scientology officials that Danny is declared. So and there's something else to consider. Scientology, David Miscavige and Danny Masterson are still co-defendants in a civil lawsuit that requires Scientologists to cooperate with Danny's defense team. And I have word that Danny's defense team is actively working with Scientology's defense team on this. It would not make sense for them to declare Danny at this point. But whether something is true or false doesn't really hinge on whether it makes sense. Miscavige pretty much does whatever the hell he wants. And he could put it in writing and not show anybody. He could not put it in writing and tell everybody. You never really know. There's no confirmation that Danny's been expelled. As of right now, I'm still operating on the basis that he hasn't officially been expelled. And it's just a rumor. Certain Scientologists are being told to keep the temperature down a little bit. Because you got a lot of Scientologists who've had to disconnect from their family members, their parents, their children, their siblings for relatively minor offenses. And here you have Danny convicted of the horrible violent crimes he's been convicted of, and he's not expelled. So, Scientologists are going to start wondering what is going on if Danny continues to not be expelled. And yet if they expel Danny, they kind of throw a wrench in the entire civil suit that Scientology is fighting. So it's hard to know what the precise truth is, but those are all my thoughts on it.
Yeah, it's really complicated. There's a whole sort of Cold War going on between Scientology and Danny Masterson and who goes first, and they don't want to throw him under the bus in case he then doesn't help them. It's weird. Right. But it's funny that you say, with what he's done to those Scientology women, it would be mad if he's not kicked out. But they knew about that for the last 20 years, Scientology, and almost encouraged it and said to those women, you pulled it in. So in a sense, I suppose he hasn't done anything wrong by Scientology doctrine.
No, I wouldn't say they encouraged it. I would say they enable, because it is true that victims in Scientology are pushed to examine in their own auditing sessions what they did, not only in their own auditing sessions, but in their own ethics handlings, what they did to pull it in. But Scientology looks at it from both sides. Like everyone is responsible for everything that's ever happened to them and by them. And so if I'm a Scientologist and I attack you, and when they're dealing with me, they're going to want me to look at how I'm responsible for it. But when they're dealing with you, they're going to want to get you to look at how you were responsible for it. So it's not one to the exclusion of the other. So that's the only reason I would stop short of saying they encouraged it. What Scientology does do is enable further abuse. By pretending like they have the ability to fix whatever is wrong with someone that causes them to do that. They don't have the ability to fix that, but they believe that they do. So once they apply the Scientology tools to it, they're like, okay, it's all done. And they knew damn well he was continuing to do it. And I've got details on this I haven't even done videos about because I don't know how to share that information without revealing identities of people who don't want to be identified at this point. They knew damn well he was still doing it. And they could have expelled him and they didn't. So that's why, do you see, I'm trying not to say they encouraged it, but they certainly enable it. If some might see that as a distinction without a difference, but to me, there's a meaningful distinction.
I think so, but it would be mad now to be like, well, we've done all the auditing, we've spoken to him for 20 years, but now that the outsider, and I don't want to use that W word because I think it got me in trouble once. But I mean, in Jehovah's Witnesses, say the worldly people or the apostates or whatever. Now that their criminal justice, which we don't care about, is now taking him to court and putting him in prison. Now we kick him out. That's almost to me like saying, oh, so we actually value the outsider crime system better than the Scientology one.
That's a very interesting point. If they kick him out, it probably will not be for the violent attacks on these women. It will be for having created such bad PR for Scientology.
Okay. Yeah.
And yet I'll tell you, I've received messages from under the radar Scientologists who are hearing what the whisper campaign is that the reason Leah Remini coordinated all these women to launch these attacks on Danny Masterson is because he must have been about to do something really powerful to expand and grow Scientology. And that's
the Russell Brand defense.
Oh my God. Yeah. The internal Scientology world is not admitting that Danny has done these things. They are still saying that this was just a strategy by Leah Remini to use Danny to attack Scientology. And so if they expel him, it's not going to be because he's done these things. It's going to be because of all the bad press he's created for Scientology. So
Aaron, have you got like all these spies in Scientology who are sort of wanting to leave but haven't properly yet? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, there's so many.
Wow.
We call them under the radar Scientologists. I was an under the radar Scientologist for like over 5 years myself before I was officially declared as a suppressive person. A lot of people they're not in a position to lose all of their business contacts, lose their job, lose their parents, lose their in-laws, lose their kids, lose their best friends. Like even when I no longer believed in Scientology at all, I did not want to actually be expelled. If someone had asked me back then what was my ideal situation, I'd be like, I'll just continue to be a spy forever. I'll keep feeding information to, Mike Rinder and Back then it was Marty Rathbun. I never wanted to turn my entire life upside down, So I appreciate why people choose to stay under the radar for as long as possible. And those people end up, essentially being spies.
Interesting. Like Relatable Reese, who I got to interview.
Yes.
Well, she's cool. Then she had a whole thing, didn't she? But that, she's happy out now and she's doing the rounds with us. So that's all nice. So you've got all those spies. Well, tell me this, David Miscavige, you mentioned that it's unclear what he's doing and he sort of might do whatever he wants with regards to, is he going to kick Danny Masterson out? Is he not going to? Whatever. Is there any sense, as we often get with authoritarian leaders, that as they age, because he must be in his 60s now, I don't know, they tend to get madder and more paranoid? I think L. Ron Hubbard got a bit that way towards the end. Is there any sense of that, or is he just straight and consistent?
I mean, my opinion is that he does seem to be deteriorating. If I were to speculate on it, it has to do with the fact that he knows that he is completely unable to reverse the dwindling spiral of Scientology. I mean, his ability to retain power relies on him convincing all the Scientologists in the world that under his leadership, Scientology is growing and expanding and prospering. And somehow he has been able to convince them of that. And they do believe that. They do believe Scientology is the fastest growing religion in the world. They believe this, even though all the evidence in front of their eyes indicates otherwise. L. Ron Hubbard himself says only statistics prove the value of the success, the competence of a manager. So if Scientology were shrinking under Miscavige's leadership, even Scientologists would not be able to justify continuing to follow him. I can only imagine the level of paranoia that he has around this subject. There's less than 30,000 Scientologists in the entire world. There's less Scientologists today than there was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago. And so to me, if he has this deteriorating mental state, it's because it would come down to this factor of how long can he keep conning all of them? They say you can't fool all of them all of the time. That's even true for him. I think the people who wake up and realize that they're being lied to by Miscavige and have been for the last 40 years, those are the ones who actually leave. And that's why Scientology is shrinking. They're not getting a lot of recruits these days. And people are leaving Scientology faster than they're joining. And I think that would be what's fueling his deteriorating mental state, is the knowledge he won't be able to continue this con forever. And when exactly will it start to unravel? Who knows?
I feel like I just got an inkling into his mind there, because sometimes I have months where the subscribers are going down and my job is to keep going no matter what and keep building. I mean, it's not, my channel is not a con. However, the feeling of losing subscribers might be similar. I'm sure people who are watching this, often many of them will have businesses or they'll have jobs where they have to do statistics and things and their performances are measured. And we all know that sinking feeling when it starts to go down and you're just tearing your hair out. Like, what can I do? Yeah, wow. I can see why he might start to go crazy. Hopefully you and I won't, if we ever start to lose subscribers and things like that. When you see that people in Scientology now can believe things like that it's growing, even though all evidence points towards the fact that it's not, and they can believe in such crazy things and out there things, and no empirical evidence will change their mind. Does it also make you feel a little bit, I don't know, a lot of people at the moment are debating Israel-Palestine, or it could be another debate, loads of different debates, and you've got people on two sides. Is it almost worthless trying to convince one person who's on one side to come to the other side? Is it almost impossible?
It's almost worthless. It's almost impossible. The people who don't want to hear anything, that's fine. You're not going to be able to change those minds. Well, that's why, but that doesn't make me less motivated to do videos on the subject and reach people, because I realize I'm only ever going to be able to reach the people who are almost at the point of waking up to it themselves. Right. So there's going to be a small percentage of people who just need someone to point out to them what they already know, and then they go, "God damn, he's right. He's right, isn't he?" And then they're like, "Okay, fine." So I'm not in it for the people who are all the way on the one side where like the more evidence you show them, the less they're going to believe you. Those people are not reachable. Whatever's, the only thing that'll make those people reachable in the future is if they are treated so horribly, so unjustly that they themselves have to start letting go of some of these deeply held beliefs. They're not going to change because of anything I do or say. They're going to change because of what's done or said to them, if they ever change at all. And for some people there really is no way of reaching them.
I feel like it's got to be you and other ex-Scientologists who do it as well, because I remember I interviewed a guy called Jesse Morton who passed away recently, actually, but he used to be an Islamist, terrorist, and went to prison for it. And then after that, he turned his life around and he talked other terrorists down, and he would do it by sort of befriending them and showing what they have in common. And that was, whereas he said to me, if I had gone in and said like, hey man, you shouldn't be doing this. And the other thing was he never went in too hard, because he knew that if he said to them like, you're completely wrong, they would just say they would shut down and say no. But what he would do is agree with them about all of their grievances about the West and all of these things, but say, but violence isn't the answer. So it's just take that violence and you just do it step by step. Is that how you would try with people?
That resonates. That resonates. When I was in Scientology, when I was in the Sea Org, people ask me now, is there anything anybody could have said to me back then that would have gotten me to think differently, open my eyes to things? I said, there really isn't. There really is not. And so I don't try. In my mind, those aren't the people I'm trying to reach with my messaging. I don't know if I answered your question or not.
Yeah, no, I think you did.
Yeah. For people who have gotten to the place mentally where they're willing to think about things, I think the approach that you've just described is the right approach.
It's so hard. It's so hard. But I think people, I think that should help us with all of our relationships. We need that sense of control and trying to get other people to believe the things we believe. And I think we can be much happier, unless our friends are in cults, but we can be much happier just going, hey, look, my friend, my family member believes a different thing to me, and that's okay. I don't have to control how they think, and we can still be friends. But Danny Masterson, will he get out? Is there any chance that this appeal is successful?
I guess you should say never. My understanding is that the prosecution team believes there's essentially a 0% chance any of this appeal works, because not only do you have to, like early in the video I mentioned this mistake from Thomas Mesereau, not only do you have to prove that was a mistake and the mistake was made, you have to prove that the outcome of the trial would have been different if he hadn't done that. And it's a very, very, very hard thing to prove. And there's reason why almost every conviction gets appealed and almost none of them get overturned. It's easier for me to say, no, there's no chance. I believe there's basically no chance, but we'll see. Never say never.
And what about, have we heard anything from Ashton Kutcher? Because that was such a big story when he came out, and Mina Kunis and all these things, and then just completely went dead.
I wish we had heard something more from him, because then I'd have a lot of great videos to do about it.
Yeah, that's how I feel.
I want to thank Ashton for an extra 5 million views last month. No, he has very smartly been very silent. That's what he should have done the entire time. Just keep your mouth shut. So yeah, no, I'm not aware of that. We've heard anything else from Ashton.
Bloody hell. That was just one of the maddest things. And they went back, and that apology was even worse than the original thing. And suddenly everybody was analyzing them. A whole big thing. Imagine if the appeals court case thing, will they get called forward to it or anything?
I don't think so. I don't think anything that happened with them. Because remember, their only involvement in this was having sent a letter to the judge asking for leniency in the sentencing. That. That's what their involvement was. So no, I don't think that'll have anything to do with the appeal process.
Man, leniency of a convicted word. Not a clever Hollywood move, I don't think. But whatever, they did what they did. Tell me a little bit, speaking of Hollywood, about Tom Cruise has been choppering to use your title, to use your Americanism, choppers to a Scientology event.
Yes. Well, the first large major international live event that Scientology has held since March 2020. Because when the lockdowns occurred in March 2020, nobody locked down harder and longer than Scientology did, which is crazy for an organization that's known to like be sort of a little bit anti-medicine, anti-vax. Miscavige was terrified of COVID, and he kept Scientology locked down in various stages until honestly just a few months ago. Even in Los Angeles, the Scientology Sea Org members are still walking around with masks, which I know there are some people that do, but those guys have to. Anyway. So since March 2020, Miscavige stopped doing large major international events, which is we're a huge component of how to keep the Scientologists in line and keep them believing and keep the expansion news flowing. Anyway, I'm being long-winded about this. Nice. Just this week in St. Hill, England, was the first. Miscavige basically reopened Scientology events for business, and Tom Cruise was there. And I'm not aware whether he was given any specific awards or brought up on stage to address everybody. I don't think he did, but he was there and he was doing photo ops. And if you're a Scientologist, the coolest thing in the world is getting to meet Tom Cruise. I mean, you realize Scientologists believe that Tom Cruise is one of the two biggest beings in this sector of the Galactic Federation. I mean, you've got Tommy Cruise and you've got David Miscavige. It doesn't get bigger than that. So tons of Scientologists have been posting photos with Tom from the event on their Instagram accounts and all that stuff. He did fly in a chopper. He attended in a black tie event in a tuxedo, looking a little rough. I'm not going to lie, looking a lot different than he did on his even Mission Impossible promo tour. Have you seen the photos?
That's interesting. No, I didn't really know much about. I haven't seen the recent photo, or maybe I did actually. Yes. Look, the thing is, when you've had this much, and he's not alone in this in Hollywood, when you've had this much stuff done to your face, there surely has to come a time when things start to look really weird. He looks like, I don't know if you ever saw that film. What was that film he was in with Penelope Cruz? Vanilla Sky. Mm-hmm. He wears a weird mask most of the film because his face, he thinks his face has been he looks like he's wearing the mask now. That's what his face looks like. His face actually looks like the mask. It's this weird blubbery thing because so much stuff has happened to his face in his bid to look and remain eternally young and youthful. It doesn't look good. I saw that he was out with a woman, but I can't remember who that was now. Yeah.
I mean, a lot of women have been posting photos from the event with Tom Cruise. I don't think he was there with a date. In fact, I posted a photo of him with a Scientologist woman, actually a former Sea Org member. And I said, Mission Impossible, finding a new girlfriend. But he wasn't.
Oh, yeah, I saw that. That's what it was.
That girl's married to another. That girl's an ex-Sea Org member. She's married to another ex-Sea Org member. So they're not on a date. Okay. But that's the thing. You've got the biggest movie star in the world cannot find a girlfriend. I mean,
that is amazing.
That
is amazing. Oh, we have to talk about that more again for the 50th time. That story, I love that story because people always say to me, well, you got a YouTube channel. What's your channel about? And I go, I talk about various things. One of them is Scientology. And then obviously Tom Cruise is the next question. And they're like, tell me something. And I'm like, well, did you know that? And people don't know. Most people watching this and listening to this do know. But most people just out there in the world don't realize that pretty much the world's most eligible bachelor in the early 2000s couldn't find a girlfriend and had to be put with this woman, Nazanin Boniadi, and just the whole story from there gets madder and madder and madder. But interesting that he flew. Why was this the first thing they've done in years in England? Is it just they love England, or can they not do events like this in America anymore?
There's only one event on the Scientology calendar that gets done in St. Hill, England, and that's the anniversary event of the International Association of Scientologists. So that live event always happens in St. Hill. Now, because the lockdowns occurred in March, and that event usually occurs in October. So that event was, held as normal in October 2019. Lockdowns occurred March 2020. There has not been a major international Scientology live event since then. This is the first one. Now, Scientology's already promoted that they're going back to their New Year's event is going to be held once again live at the Shrine Auditorium. David Miscavige will be presiding over that event. So this, the answer to your question was, why didn't they do one? Because they stopped doing events in March 2020. And they haven't. Yeah.
And
They did do a live New Year's event in Clearwater, Florida, but it wasn't at a large venue. Normally the New Year's event's held at the Shrine Auditorium in Los Angeles. They just held it in the auditorium of the Fort Harrison Hotel in Clearwater, Florida. So on the one hand, Miscavige did preside over that event, but on the other hand, it wasn't one of these big giant productions that Scientology used to do about 5 times a year.
Okay, I see. And tell me then, what I'm wondering then, okay, they've got this big event, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, in this big sort of posh house that they're in, some sort of house. Most of the day, what is actually happening? Are people just sort of sitting there? What are they all doing?
Oh, do you mean over this 3-day period?
Yeah.
Oh, these events have the purpose these events serve is to fundraise and to activate Scientologists to participate in various activities, whether it's the volunteer ministers or the Way to Happiness or the Youth for Human Rights. Scientology has all these little public facing social betterment front groups that they encourage Scientologists to participate in, because these front groups are used to just generate good publicity or good press for Scientology. They're also trying to get Scientologists back onto course and signed up for more auditing. So, yeah, it's just Scientologists are really used to these kind of things. The free wins, the Scientology's ship. So this IAS event, it's the anniversary of the creation of the IAS. Well, the Free Winds has a major annual event celebrating the anniversary of its maiden voyage. And that's a similar thing where, except instead of doing an event 3 days in a row, the Free Winds events are like, they're held like 5 weeks in a row, like 5 Saturdays in a row. And it's always the same thing at these events, trying to fundraise, trying to sell courses in auditing, and trying to activate Scientologists to participate a little bit more in the activities of their local organization. It's not very exciting.
Well, exactly. Just odd life that they've got. I don't have time really to do question stuff. Are you all right to call it about now, Aaron?
Oh yeah, that's right. Oh, because you got to jump. Yeah. Let's do something later about John Travolta. Tom Cruise was noticeably present for this event. John Travolta was noticeably absent. And when it comes to this particular event, John Travolta is one of the people who has received the special IAS Freedom Medal. And all those Freedom Medal winners are supposed to show up to this event and like get together and take a big photo op. In other words, if John Travolta were to go to any Scientology event, it would be this one. And yet he wasn't there. I think there's something to discuss about that.
Oh, right. Put a 1 in the chat if you want Aaron and I to do another video in the next couple of days about John Travolta. Put a 2 in the chat if you are just dissenting against us, and that's okay, because we're not a cult and plurality of opinion. Maybe you've had enough of me and Aaron, so put a 2 for that, but put a 1 if you do want to get that John Travolta one, and we'll go into that, put it on both of our channels. Thank you everyone for being here. Please do, if you're watching on mine, go over to Aaron's and hit that like button and do all those things, watch the video, whatever. It's the same if you're on his, come over, like, do the you know this stuff. We're doing a job, we're doing our job, and we love you guys and we love each other. And there's important. We've got stuff to tell you about me and Aaron in a few months, but I think we might wait a few months. We're not getting married, but I'll tell you. We'll tell you later, though. Yeah, keep watching both of our channels. We're both going to put end screens up, so keep watching it all and hit those like buttons.